Welcome back to this series of how to making a retro looking speaker unit thing. I don't know what to call it yet. In this episode you are going to learn how to make the geometry node system, which is the system that allows us to tweak the speaker grill as we want, because we want to have the ability to choose the density and the size and what's not to like in this system. And this is going to be really fun, so stick around for that. After that we're going to texture it, so we'll have like this amber texture, the plastic texture, this textile texture, the glass texture, and the cloth texture for the wire. So stick around and enjoy. In the last episode we made this model of a speaker, but there's no grill right now. So we're going to make the grill in this episode. And we're also going to make the shading, the textures for the object. By selecting your cube, we are going to change our world origin to be in the middle of this face. So pressing Shift S, we can place it right here. Then we're going to add an object. It doesn't matter what object it is, so I'm gonna make a cube. Then we're going into the geometry nodes editor, and then it should look like this. I'll drag this window over as we are not going to need it. Then I'll add a new geometry node system and disconnect the geometry for now. The first thing we're going to add is a grid system. So pressing Shift A and search grid. If you're placing it in geometry, you will see a plane with the size 1 by 1 meter. If you're going into wireframe mode, you can see there is 1 to 3 vertices by this size, and if you up it, it will make the grid bigger. So it's vertice based. I'll make it back to 3. Then we're going to add a split edges, so it's not one face right now, but 4 faces with all 4 edges to them. Then we're going to make scale the elements, so you can see that we are separating them. We want the points to be in the middle, so we're scaling them quite a bit down. It doesn't matter. This just has to be low. Then we need our circle, because the holes in the grill is going to be circled there. So I'll add a mesh circle. That is going to define the outer circle of the mesh, extrude mesh, and then I'm going to raycast it, and I'm going to target that geometry, and then I'll separate geometry by this input. Now we need to merge. If you're only looking at this right now, we have a lot of small spaces, and we only want singular vertices. So we need to merge by distance, so that they are merging together. That looks terrible, so we need to find the right distance, and that looks fine. So now we have 1 vertices, and then we have to instance on point like this, and then we want this. This would make whatever we put inside this will be on every vertice. So if we put a cylinder on this mesh, then we will have a cylinder on every vertices. And right now it's pretty big, so we're going to make this a lot smaller. And then we have a lot of cylinders. To make it easier to look at, I'll just make this 0.1. Now we have a grid of circles. That's the start. We need to set this to edges and faces, and set this value to something like 0.5. And then you can see some things is going on. If you scale this up, you can't see anything, but if you scale it down, you can see our cube is starting to appear. And you can change the radius here, and then we have a circle of points. So these two combined, we give the circle of points. It's just saying we have it on the inside, it can be -1, and this is determining the scale of the circle. So changing this amount will choose how many there is, but if you're making this many, you should also change the radius of the cylinder. So something like this. I don't want that many, I want like 32 maybe, not even, like 28. And then I want this radius to be larger. Like this should be fine. You can always tweak this later. We'll make a non-destructive system. Okay, and now we'll add a transform node. Put it here. Rotate it by the y-axis by 90. And then it's up against the wall. Change the the depth of the cylinder to be behind this wall. So like this. And then we need to say to the program that all this is mesh. So we realize it. Instances. And now it's a geometry. You can also scale the whole thing by scaling this. I'm just holding down while dragging down to scale them evenly. That should be here maybe. And then I'll just go back to the layout menu. Selecting your cube and a Boolean modifier right here. And choosing this object, pressing H to hide. And now you have a grid. If you need to adjust it, you should choose your cube and turn off in viewport. Then scale it and then turn it on again. And then you have like a grid. It's going to be a symbol. We are only going to render it from the front, so it's going to be like a symbol model. I'll select the face and set my cursor to the selected. Then I'll add a cylinder, rotate it by the y-axis, scaling it down to like something like this, moving it out from the mesh and moving it in place where I want it, like here or something. Taking this face, pressing G to move it, and holding down the scroll wheel will move it along an axis. And it should be pretty long. It's like a jack stick input thing. Then I'll insert it and move it out. But we want two, we want one for each side. I will mirror it to the other side by the y-axis, like this. And then I'm going to add the curve. So add curve bezier. In the top view, I'm going to move this vertices over to the edge and rotate it around. This is going to be the path of our wire. So as I want this to feel quite small, I want the curves to have like big movements. So inside the object data properties, we'll find the geometry and set the depth to something higher, something like this, maybe even higher. And then I'm going to shape and turn this resolution up. If I turn it down, you can see that it's being more jagged. And if you turn it up, it's being more even, I guess. Then I'm going to duplicate it in top view. In edit mode, I'm going to move the vertices over here. Choosing this, set my cursor, Shift S, cursor to selected. Out of edit mode, I'll add a plane and scale it by, I don't know, 15. I want this to feel like a room, so also add a back roll. Just Shift D to duplicate, rotate by 90. Scale it down, move it up, scale it down, move it here. I want it to be around here. Selecting some vertices and moving it over. Welcome back. We are going to make the shading in this episode. I'm going to move this window over, pressing here and choosing this shader editor. I like to work this way, so I have like a window over here where I can see the shading and then just this window over here. I don't need all the other things, I guess. But I'm going to work on this in cycles, so I'm just choosing the cycles render engine. And then I have a RTX GPU, so I'll choose GPU. Now everything is gray and quite dark, so I'm going to add a lamp. Add a shader for the knob. I'll call it knob. It should be a metal shader, I think. So I'll turn metallic up, and already you are seeing the difference. I'll turn the color down because I think it should be like a dark metal. Then I want the rim to be some sort of tactile material. You're going to add a brick texture. But right now it doesn't look like this shader from the picture. So we're going to add a vector node. Yes, Ctrl T to add a mapping node. And then we can rotate it by the Z axis by 45. We'll make it look like this. Then I'll turn the scale up to 12. Set this size to 2.5. Turn the mortar smoothness up to 1, which is the maximum. I think we should turn the scale down again, so we can see what we're doing. This should be 0.2, like this. It should look like this. And then we have a nice base for our texture. We need to use the object instead of the generated. No, we're going to use the UV instead of the generated. But then we need to UV unwrap it. So if we turn on overlays again, going into edit mode and pressing U to unwrap, follow active cross, and then you have the seam at the bottom. Plug this into a bump mat. So dragging the color into the height, the normal into the normal. And then viewing this material, you can already see that we have a nice tile texture, but it's quite aggressive, so I'll turn down the distance quite a lot to like 0.1, 0.05, going down to the shader, adding a new material, choosing knob, and duplicating the material, metal, and then I'll just delete this. Going into edit mode, you can choose everything but this, so Ctrl I will invert the selection, and then you can assign. And now we have this knob, but it looks quite flat and unrealistic, and maybe the roughness should be lower as well, 0.4 maybe. And I'll change the roughness in here to 0.4. So we are going to make it a bit more rough. I'll use a noise texture for that. If you're looking at the noise texture, it should look something like this. I will make the scale pretty big, because I just want it to be some sort of detail thing, maybe not that big maybe. And then I'll not mess with the other things. Then I'll just make it into the bump map. Then we have an easy texture that makes it a bit more interesting. Into normal, it should be into height. I'll use the same texture on this. We need two different plastic materials, so I'm going to make an edge right here, and let's try Ctrl R and the edge loop right here. I'll do yellow plastic and change the color to yellow. So adding a noise texture and a bump map, connecting the factor to the height, the normal to the normal, and then we have this red thing. Ctrl T, taking the object into the vector, and then we have this very distorted thing. Turn the strength down to 0.2 maybe, and the scale up to like 50. There we have a really good plastic material. We should turn the roughness down so we have a more shiny material. I like that. So adding an image texture, I just made a simple image texture inside Adobe Illustrator. I will link it in the description. I don't want it to be drawn over it. I want it to be machined into the plastic, so I don't want the bump map to influence my text. So I'm going to add a mix shader. Not a mix shader, a mix color. The factor should be this, and the A color should be black, because black is not influenced, and the factor should go into P, and the results should go into height. And in the same way, we're going to mix the colors, so the color into the factor, and then I want the other color to be black. I'm going to turn this, and I want the text to be black, so I'll just make it black. Now we need to unwrap it to make our text visible. We also need this to be in the UV. UV is influenced by the UV. We can use the same if we want, so we don't have this node. Make it simpler. Then I'm going to unwrap one face at a time. So we start with this face, unwrap, going into the UV editor, and turning material view on, waiting for a moment. Come on, yes. Then I want the one to be here, so I'll rotate this, move it up, scale it down, scale it a bit down more maybe. I want it to be smaller, so I'll just insert this face, and then scale it up again. and then it could be smaller. And if you zoom in, you can see that it's like machined into it. It doesn't have this roughness, and I really like that. I'll do the same here. Unwrap, rotate, scale down, insert, scale up, and then we have this like distortion. So just select the face and move it out of the black area. But then you can see it's kind of influencing with the other parts. And we don't want that, so inside of the shading, we're going to select that it's not repeating, it's extended. Like this. And then I also want this face to have a 1 and this face to have a 0. So I'm going back to the UV editor, going to my front view, selecting these faces, pressing U, project from U. Then it's projecting what it sees, so it's like 1-to-1 scale. I'll take this and move it up here and scale it until I like it. I think this is nice. So we have like an on and off button. And if you want it to be larger, you can just scale it on. So I'll just make a glass material, call it glass, going down to transmission, turn it all the way up. Then we have glass, and I want the roughness to be like 0.3 or something, and I want it to be a green LED. The way we are going to light one of the LEDs is quite simple. We're going to add, just first of all pressing Shift S, set the cursor to the origin, then add a light point. Right now it's lighting where you can see the circle, so like this should be 1, really small. But now it's really bright, so this should also be like more, maybe not that small. Like, you get the point, it should be small. So now we have light in this. Now we need to make it different colors in the plastic. So I'll just duplicate this, add a new, choose yellow plastic, and then call it pink plastic if you want. And then you just select the faces you want to be pink and assign. I also want this assign, making it pink. For the screws, I'm also going to choose a missing. And for the jackstick, I'll choose metal, and then I'll choose this ring, and I'll assign this material and make it the knob material. So we have this grip and those as well. And I'll just make a bevel here, make it, and then I'll apply the scale. For the wire material, I'm going to add a new material. We want it to be like a fabric covered wire. So adding a magic texture, if we look at that, and then scale it up quite a bit, it looks like some fabric thing. Maybe if we look at the factor, see it better. So we'll just use this for the bump map. But I want control over how much it's influenced in each area. So I'm using ramp node to make it more tight. So something like this should be nice. And then I'm going to add a map range node. And then I'm saying our values, black is 0, white is 1. Our values from 0 to 1 should be not from 0 now, but 0.3, 0.2 maybe. And into the normal. And then setting the strength to like 0.1. Also going to use this color ramp. So if you change and set it to color, taking the color into the factor, the result into the base color, then we can set the value of our wire to something we like. Okay, so the last part of my tutorial about how to make the amber texture got quite confusing. So I'll try to explain what I've done in here, so you maybe have a better chance to understand what I'm saying. So first of all, I've duplicated the plastic texture, so we have like the same grainy texture, and will it bump up the strength? you can see that we have a slight roughness to it. But I'll turn the strength down again. Then we have a hue saturation node where we have chosen our color we want. It can be like anything. I will go with the yellow amber looking because I really like that. And then I've turned the value up in here. If you have chosen a color in here, then the value is like limited to 1. You are allowed to type 2, but I think you have more control over the value in a hue saturation node. So I use that. But you can use the default color. Then I've turned the roughness to about 0.43. And important thing is the IOR. Low IOR, it will look kind of strange. It's very see-through. A higher value would make it not see-through. So 1.3 seems like a good value for this kind of purpose. And I hope that made it more clear of how you make the amber texture. In the next video you are going to learn how to set up the light system and tweak the render settings so we get a render we like. So I hope you'll stick around for that. I'll see you next time. Remember to subscribe and like, and have a good time.